Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Great to see so many colleagues joining us from lots of different sectors, actually. We've had a huge interest in this webinar today from colleagues across the employment sector, government colleagues are in the room, but also charities and other partners. So it's great to have a really diverse audience. We're going to kick off because there is so much to do. So as you will see, we are recording this session and slides and the recording will be available post the session today. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Laura Jane Rawlings. I'm Chief Exec here at Youth Employment UK, and I'm delighted to be joined by two friends and actually two experts on all things employment and policy as we talk about what's next for youth employment policy in today's webinar. A little bit of housekeeping from me to kick us off. Please keep your microphones muted. It's great to see your faces. Very happy to have some beautiful people around the room. But if you can keep us muted, if you can keep yourselves muted, it'll allow us to keep in flow and keep to time today. You can use the chat function. The chat function is open. I have a number of brilliant Youth Employment UK colleagues who are on standby to answer your technical questions, but also share links to things that we might be talking about through the session. But I also really invite you to just put in who you are and where you're calling from today, and allow others to introduce themselves to each other. It's a great community at Youth Employment UK, so we welcome you to be part of that. If you're having difficulty hearing, please do check in and join or rejoin. Hopefully everything is going to be crystal our end because there's a lot to do. As I say, the slides and the recording will be shared post the session, and we'll also be checking in with your feedback on how you found this particular event today. So in the session, we're going to be talking about the latest policy updates, what's changing and why it matters, particularly focused on youth employment. There is an immense amount of policy change happening on all sorts of subjects and areas. This is going to stay really targeted around employment, young people and skills. That's the sweet spot, at least for the speakers that we've got today. I think it'd be unfair if we started asking you about house building. So we'll keep it tight to skills policy. And we're also going to be exploring kind of really what that impact is on employers and what we might expect and anticipate that impact, therefore, then to be on young people in particular. So as I say, I'm joined by two friends, long-standing friends, but also excellent leaders across the skills and employment landscape. Dr Fiona Aldridge, who is CEO of the Skills Federation, and Kate Shoesmith, Deputy CEO of the Recruitment and Employment Federation, which a long time ago I was once a member when I was working in recruitment. And then Kate came onto our original board when Youth Employment UK was founded back in 2012. So we really do go way back, but don't look any older, I don't think, Kate. So that's good news. And we should probably look older given where we've been in the last 12 years in terms of youth employment policy. So I'm just going to give a couple of headlines around things that we're thinking about and looking at, but starting with what is happening to the youth labour market and our young people in particular. As we'll know, the headlines have been quite significant over the last couple of weeks. Chancellor announced it yesterday. The Prime Minister's been talking about it. We have 1 in 8 young people who are not in education, employment or training. When Youth Employment UK was founded back in 2012, we had 1 million neat young people, which was the highest level ever recorded. And over those last 12, nearly 13 years, we've been working tirelessly to try and bring that number down, to understand the challenges that young people face, to work with employers and to work with policymakers. So it has broken my heart a little bit this last 6 months to see those numbers really ticking back up, and now we're at 986,000 young people who are neat. So we're back at that million marker pretty much, with not too many signs of a change to coming back down either. And they're the things that we're going to be talking about with you today. So amongst that youth population, young people have an unemployment rate of about 14.5%, which compares to the all age rate of about 4.2%, 4.3%. So again, most often young people are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than the older age groups. But what's really troubling in and amongst that is the rise in economic inactivity. So those young people who are not engaging in education, employment or training, but they're also not ready for work. So they are not looking for work in those moments. They're not ready to take on an opportunity if they were offered it. And we've seen that economic inactivity rise across all ages, but really much starkly amongst young people 16 to 24, and signs of that rising have been really focused around the mental ill health challenges that we have seen coming in amongst our young people, rise of anxiety and issues of well-being, but also greater issues of young people with special education needs and disabilities and ill health disorders that are needing more support than ever. So we are in quite a turbulent time for young people and youth employment, and I should say at a time when young people's confidence in themselves and their next steps is at an all-time low. We're certainly not seeing kind of this data change those attitudes that they have about opportunity and what comes next. We have got to really work hard and dig in to change some of that. And will the policy that's coming do some of that work for us? As a small team, as we are here at Youth Employment UK, I describe us often as small and mighty. We have a policy team that are currently watching about 15 policy developments coming through the various government departments. When we think about youth unemployment and the barriers, it's not just education and welfare that we care about, DfE and DWP. It's also issues around Ministry of Justice, housing, communities, health. We have a youth strategy team over at DCMS, so it's much broader because actually it's young people's journeys from childhood to adolescence into adulthood that really affects their ability and opportunity to move out into employment and positive destinations. So we are watching things right across the spectrum, but the things that we're really going to pick up on today are things around the Employment Rights Bill. And the REC have been doing a hell of a lot of work on the impacts of the Employment Rights Bill, so I'm going to let Kate get into that with us shortly. But we're also super interested in the children's wellbeing and the schools bill. We are watching and responding and working with the team, looking at the curriculum and assessment review. We have got a post-16 review as part of that. We have now had the appointments of the CEO and board at Skills England, who'll be taking on the key role in driving through apprenticeship change, but also whether or not they're going to develop that apprenticeship levy into the growth and skills levy will all come through from Skills England. At the end of last year, we had the Get Britain Working paper through the Department for Work and Pensions, which for us included the Youth Guarantee Trailblazer, but the Youth Guarantee Promise, which was a paper that Youth Employment UK and partners had been putting forward to the various government parties ahead of the general election last year. So we were really pleased to see Labour pick up our youth guarantee, and we've been working very closely with them on the delivery of that and what that might look like. So we've got a youth guarantee with 8 trailblazer areas now confirmed. And I'm delighted to say, as soon as I jump off this at 3 o'clock, I'm jumping into chairing the very first meeting of the Cambridge and Peterborough Youth Guarantee Board, of which I've taken on as a role to support them in the delivery of their guarantee across that authority. We also have the Get Britain Working review, which is being led by Sir Charlie Mayfield. It's going to look at how businesses and trade can create more opportunities, particularly for those who are economically inactive, and what that will look like. That will dovetail really nicely into the work that we're doing here, as we have recently launched the new APPG inquiry on how we can support employer engagement with the youth guarantee. So lots of work happening across the youth guarantee, the Get Britain Working paper. We saw yesterday, and then the lead up to yesterday's physical moment, that there's going to be a big shake-up to the welfare system, including changes to personal independent payments and so on. And I'll just touch on some of the announcements we heard yesterday in the strategy. And then I briefly mentioned DCMS, who are looking into development of an entire youth strategy in the wake of them closing down the National Citizen Service. It's their new approach to ensuring that young people aged 10 to 21-year-olds are being represented across policy. So lots of work happening in DCMS. So it's no wonder that we're all feeling quite tired by the time Friday comes, when there are so many announcements coming into our world. And no more so than yesterday, where we were watching the spring statement announced. We know that the Chancellor was hoping that this would just be a sort of a brief update, but ended up, due to the ABR reforecasting, having to make a formal spring statement. Not too much detail in terms of the broader skills and employment landscape, I guess we could say, other than where we've seen that focus on building houses and homes, and how how the government are going to reinvest or invest more money at a quicker rate into developing the skills and the workforce that's required to build the amount of homes that are coming. So we're going to see some investment around technical colleges and boot camps, and an increase in trying to recruit trainers, lecturers into our FE sector to be able to meet the skills demand that exists within that sector. So probably some opportunity in there for people on our call to be thinking about how they can support the construction sector. We saw the Back to Work programme support being announced. There's £1 billion support to get people who are unemployed and economically inactive into work. There's various packages and programmes coming, some of which had already been announced, but the packages intend to be rolled out over a 5-year period. So £1 billion isn't being released in one go, it's being released over kind of a phased approach and period over the coming years. Touched on those cuts in welfare funding and freezes to things like universal credit and the health element, and changes of eligibility, including under 22s not being able to claim the PIP payments as part of those changes coming. We've seen an announcement there yesterday for £80 million capital fund for employer-led training. I'm curious to get into that, and if that's going to be something that shifts the dial across all those other sectors that have got workforce challenges, if that's going to be something that supports outside of our construction and defence workforce investment, if there's going to be enough money left in that pot. And as I say, that we've got that significant investment to build. I wrote it down yesterday and I decided to pull it through today. A defence industrial superpower. Like, wow, 2025, and that's the goal of the year, is to be a defence industrial superpower. It frightens and thrills me, I think, on different levels for different reasons. What we've got to wait for, though, is the departmental budget announcement. So all departments being told that they've got to make a 15% saving. That's the thing that's going to really make a difference, I think, in some of the day-to-day work that we have. What does that mean for who will be cut from government departments? Are we going to lose key staff that are working on youth policy, or are we going to start seeing more quangos lose some funding? Are they going to have to start really rethinking about some of the organisations that sit outside that are funded by the department, and will they follow the same way as NHS England? Some of that, I think, is going to come out in the wash over the next week or two, as those leaders of the various departments have to present their budget and their approach to reducing their overhead cuts. So that's what we know from yesterday. And then just before I get into the conversation with my colleagues, what I found fascinating and worrying was this graph that came through to me from the Resolution Foundation, who are presenting a webinar themselves on Monday about the cost of employment. And I just thought this was really interesting. We know that we've had rising youth unemployment levels. In fact, they've been rising since the pandemic. And what we really need to do is to ensure that employers feel confident in hiring and bringing those young people into their businesses. And young people are, as we hear often, are not always work ready. And so there's a risk around businesses bringing them in. And so the balance of that is usually then the lower wage rate for young people, but also the kind of flexible employment options that employers might have. However, with the Employment Rights Bill and the national minimum wage going up, and the national insurance costs going up, we are now seeing that actually that minimum cost for businesses has gone up, and up now to over 14%, which we know, we're hearing already from employers, that it's going to affect their confidence in hiring any age person, but in particular, of course, they're young people. So that's the bit that we want to get into in conversation today. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides so we can see more of each other. She says, stop doing that. Excellent. So Fee, now you've had some really interesting roles over the last couple of years that give you a breadth of insight across lots of these policy areas. But now as Chief Exec of the Federation of gosh, I've lost it in my head. You're representing sector bodies, which is a lot of them. It's a lot of these sectors that are affected by this. I just wonder if we'll start with you on what your members are telling you they're seeing from their membership.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me to join the conversation. And it made me tired actually just watching the slides and the amount of policy change we're waiting for and trying to advocate. So yes, I've taken on a new role at Chief Executive of the Skills Federation. So it's a membership body. It's for employer-led sector skills body. So employers fund these bodies to think really hard about the skills that their sector needs. So to try and understand them and then try and think about how to respond them. And between them, they have about 150,000 employer members. It's been really, really exciting and interesting to find out more about those sectors. And there's a real contrast because, as you say in those figures, employers are it's more expensive for them to take on people, and therefore the risk of taking on young people, unproven, who we know will need some support, as we all did when we started work. This is not something specific about this generation in itself. This is about when young people start in the labour market. At the same time, all of them are flagging labour market shortages and skill shortages. And I do think there is something about how we de-risk it for employers, how we best support young people whilst not telling them they're the problem, how we de-risk it for employers as well, so that employers can take a step in to employ those young people. A lot of my sector body members have got some great careers programs. They're advertising vacancies to young people. They're really trying to attract young people to come to their sector. So there are vacancies and they are really interested in young people, but I think it can, as your slides show, feel really risky at the minute. It's really expensive, and thinking about how we get that right is helpful. So we've got to think about how we use public money well, but also what we can do to really encourage employers. I'm really conscious one of those measures is that we've waived national insurance contributions for young apprentices. But do you know how many employers I talk to that don't even know that that's there? So there is something about when we put something in place, we really need to get the right channels to letting employers know and give them confidence that this could be a great move for them.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? And actually, when it's done well, what we see, and we'll talk maybe about some of those results later. When we invest in our young people, when we invest in their kind of early career roles, it can pay dividends. But that confidence piece is really challenging. And Kate, one of my favourite bits of research the REC produced, thankfully, is the jobs index and what's happening in terms of vacancy rates and vacancy numbers. Are we seeing that confidence and hiring wane in terms of your world?
Yeah, so thank you, LJ. We've got a series of different data points that just might help give a little bit of context to this. One of them is we ask hiring managers, so any employer that's looking to hire, what's your confidence like in the economy overall? And then what's your confidence like in terms of thinking about your investment in hiring right now? Completely to be expected, confidence in the overall economy is in the negative territory. We've got new data that will be coming out very shortly to say where are we now. It's been getting better, but oh my goodness, it couldn't have been any lower, that confidence in the economy. And then to speak to Fiona's exact point, confidence in hiring, it's not as good as it was, but people still say, I need to hire because I've got skills and labour shortages. So we did a bit of economic modelling just over a year ago now. And when you add it all together, we know that skills shortages, they cost us as an economy around £39 billion a year. And that's significant. It's like building two Elizabeth lines. So we know that it holds us back in terms of what we need to do. Then the other data we do, one of them is report on jobs, done that for centuries probably, but for a very long time now. People like the Bank of England like to use it because it's a lead indicator before you get the ONS stats that tell you exactly what's happened in the jobs market. So because recruiters get all that information about who's hiring, what they're looking to do. And that's not particularly optimistic reading either, in that it's telling us that in February, so the latest for information available, the vacancy rate had stalled again, and it'd gone down, and it's been falling 16 months in a row now. Again, not unexpectedly though, right? So if you think about that broader economic context, what's been happening geopolitically, all of the macroeconomic trends, it's to be expected that businesses aren't as confident about bringing people on, and they've been pooling and holding on to vacancies for longer than they should, and that has a direct impact, exactly as you're both saying, in terms of the aptitude or the willingness to hire people, where you might feel, and we can argue this, is that you might feel you're taking a risk on somebody, and I think that's where the conversation goes. Is it really, or is there an opportunity here rather than seeing it as a challenge? So to not be entirely negative about all of this, but when you break down that vacancy data, so Office for National Statistics tell us there's over 800,000 job vacancies right now. All of our labour market tracker data on the job vacancies, they tell us that there are opportunities there. And it is about how do you get that information out to people through the right channels. So construction jobs have been going up slowly, and you often think about those as a bit of a bellwether of if people are investing in building. If you look across the skyline and when there's cranes in the skyline, that's a good sign. It means that the economy is starting to turn a corner. So there's a 4.7%, I'll read my notes, increase in construction jobs last month in terms of vacancies. And then if you go into other sectors, there were 14,800 vacancies out there for chefs last month. So the people are just carrying these jobs. 16,500 nurse vacancies, 30,000 for programmers, software engineers. And I know in the world of AI that's changing rapidly, but there's still this vast need for those techie skills. And 27,600 secondary school teachers. And there's a whole gamut of, landscape gardeners went up in demand. There are so many opportunities there. It's just how do we get that information out there more readily and make it more readily available?
And Fiona, we're going to talk about how the youth guarantee might be some part of that. When we think about youth policy and youth employment policy, it's a world you have been in for quite some time. And particularly if we think about a place like the West Mids that had really high levels of youth unemployment for a long time, it is not just simply a case of getting young people to the job, right? And we have to really recognise some of the stuff that's happening underneath the surface.
Yeah, if only it was just as issue is here's a job, here's a young people, let's connect them up. That would make our lives much easier, wouldn't it? Yeah, so for those who aren't aware, so before joining Skills Federation, I worked with the West Midlands Mayor, so West Midlands Combined Authority, on employment, skills, health and community. So really thinking about the place. And actually the West Midlands, one of the youngest regions in Europe, a third of its population are under 25. So young people are really important to the region now and in the future, and yet it's got youth unemployment rates double the national average. So the incoming Mayor, Richard Parker, made it a real priority to say, how do we tackle both youth unemployment and youth inactivity as well? So not just people looking for jobs, but people say really struggling with health conditions and therefore not even in that place at all. We've thought really hard about how we support them to get the right skills, thought about how we bring in employers to offer work experience and placements and apprenticeships. And there's so many things we ask of them, isn't it? The kind of coordination is a big step forward. But there are other things too. So one of the biggest drivers in the West Midlands of young people being out of education, out of employment, actually is just poverty. And there's real challenges about the houses that they live in, the benefit rules that they're faced with, and transport. So one of the things that we're doing as a combined authority, where you have transport links as well as levers over skills and housing, is to think about, have you got the right transport routes, but are they also accessible, affordable and safe for young people? Because actually even when there's a bus route there and young people can afford them, they don't always want to take that route because of their safety. So it ends up being a much more complicated system than you think. And so you have to look at it holistically, and that's where place is a really good way. So I've been really pleased to see mayors have devolved powers to try and tackle that, and organisations like Youth Employment UK, Youth Futures Foundation, some of the other youth organisations have been really critical in helping us think, what do we know that works? How do we involve young people in telling us what they want? Because that's really important, isn't it? And how do we bring employers to the table to connect the two together?
Yeah, and it's something it is really interesting, but it's also the reason why this side. It's also the reason why I have this map up behind me, because I love place-based thinking. I think it's really, really important. But I wanted to see how many of these regions weren't with a mayor, including the one that I live in. And actually, when the finances are as tight as it seems they are with national government, there's probably going to be less thinking about how we level up those places that aren't being led by a mayor, and what are we doing for those young people. So there's a risk to some of that really brilliant place policy, is that it will leave places behind at a phenomenal rate, and something that I don't hear enough about, how we're going to close that gap for those places without. Kate, is that something you wanted to?
I suppose just that national youth guarantee is really important. It's great that the government have committed to it. I think lots of what the government is doing is in the right direction, but I think there's something about pace and scale, because actually we know that if young people are out of work under 23, you can see it in their employment rates and their income into their 40s. So it's really critical that we act quickly and well in an evidence-based way. And I think we've got to get up to speed with it. What does a national guarantee look like? And I think importantly for me, what are we actually guaranteeing them? So not what's the range of services that you could find your way around, but if those things don't work, what's the guarantee that as a country we will make to you as one of our young people that will help you get into the labour market, help you get a good job and build a good life?
I think there's some of the questions we haven't got to yet with this policy. Sorry, Kate, go.
No, not at all. It's we're also excited about the topic, aren't we? So apologies. I couldn't agree more. And I think the other bit is just joining together some of government policy, because we're talking a lot about, so you mentioned Skills England and you know, that whole creation of an industrial strategy, and an industrial strategy is only going to work if it's rooted in a place as well. So there'll be lots of academic-y types of debates. People like us go to these meetings where you talk about which sectors are we picking? Are we picking winners? And actually when you're picking some of these sectors and these occupational areas, you're picking them based on a place as well. And you've got to be really understanding how it's embedded within a region for there to be true opportunities for everybody. So just the simple process of joining some of these conversations together is super important, because I couldn't agree more. The biggest blockers we ever see right now in terms of how does somebody get a job is understanding the process of what on earth do I need to do to go through this process. What do I need to know about the organisation? And I'm not joking, how do you get there in the bus route? Oh my goodness, it's so important. If there is no bus, that's it. I can't go to that job. That's the end of it. I don't have transport that's available to me. And just those really simple things we see as like direct blockers of people getting the right opportunities.
And that's, I mean, we see it every year in the Youth Voice Census. For those of you that haven't been connected with Youth Employment UK very long, you might not know that we produce the biggest insight around young people and their experiences, who they are, and their barriers to opportunity, what works for them and what doesn't work for them, in an annual report. And the census will go live for the question set for 2025 on Monday. But just in 2024's data set, you know, the key findings: anxiety, the barriers for young people, anxiety, cost of living crisis, discrimination, and that kind of sense of no opportunity. 1 in 10 young people think they can find an opportunity where they live. So 9 in 10 are not believing that there's opportunities where they are. And so it's all of those disconnections, but it's actually going downstream. And I think that's perhaps one of my frustrations that we have in the current policy landscape, is I don't know how much of it's going downstream. We know some of these real big issues that start with young people start much earlier. You know, the places that they live in or their experiences they have. Only 36% of young people in school last year were offered work experience, but that's one of the essential hiring criteria most companies have. When do we start looking at 10-year-olds and their literacy levels ready for employment, Fiona?
I don't know, but it's an absolutely valid point, isn't it? So when I was in the West Midlands, we have skills funding for people aged 19 plus, and what I probably always knew but really learnt was that 19 is too late. If you're picking someone at 19 and thinking about how am I going to get them to get their English and maths, or really appreciate learning and training, or think about the careers that they want, it's so much harder, so much more expensive, and you've lost so many people at that stage. I think it's quite helpful that some of the careers work is now taking place on that place level, and that mayors are choosing to focus it on some of those schools where they perhaps got less chance to pick this up naturally through their parents. You know, for lots of us on this call, our kids will probably be okay because we know all sorts of people, but how about those kids that don't? And also, I don't know about you, there's just so many things about new jobs that I just don't know about. One of the, as I've been getting to know my members, been asking them about what they do, about careers, the National Skills Academy for food and drink manufacturing is one of my members, and they've got this great resource called Tasty Careers, which I really love. And if you've not seen it, please Google Tasty Careers and go onto it. It's funded by the Welsh Government, and it shows you what job profiles are and gives you insight into careers, and it tells you where they are. There's vacancies there too, and support to help apply for them, and what skills you need. And it's just not a sector I'd have thought about. And so it's easy to think there are no jobs around if you can't see them, and increasingly our jobs are quite invisible. You know, we can see someone in a shop, or perhaps someone driving one of those expensive buses that people are talking about in the chat, but actually those really interesting jobs that perhaps didn't exist when our parents were at school, how do we find out about those? So actually thinking about careers really early, what sorts of opportunities, not just lecturing them, and how we give them a chance to experience some of the great things that are coming up is really important to do. And I think the combination of those sectors and employers individually and places working together, we've got to get it a bit more coherent so that it's not a sort of luck that you land on something, but really, you know, better chances for all of our young people.
I couldn't agree with that more. Let's just move us on a little bit and we will come to some of your brilliant questions, but I want to move us on, Kate, to the Employment Rights Bill. What do we know? What do you know? How do you see this affecting the real practical parts of employers' life and day to day now? What are the headlines here?
So I mean, it's huge. So when Angela Rayner as DPM talks about this being once in a generation change in terms of workers' rights, I completely and utterly agree. And you go back to the very roots of it in terms of if you stick at what Labour produced as a party around the New Deal for working people, and they're bringing forward a lot of those ideas. So I think there's only about 28 of the proposals that came from the plan to make work pay that are in the bill that is likely to get royal assent, as you said, in the summer. But the scale of those changes alone, because there's loads more to come, is quite significant. And I suppose the piece, and this is we're getting it all the time. So it's, you know, I work for a professional membership body as well, just like Fiona, and it's we represent employer views, and our members are they're worried about the scale of it, and it does impact, because as soon as you're uncertain about what's happening, there's pause, and businesses do hold on, and they're like, oh, should we just wait and see what happens here? The piece to keep in mind, though, is that nothing fundamentally will change until next year at the earliest. So there's a long process to go through. So the bill gets royal assent, but a lot of the direct day-to-day practical things that a business and employer will have to do will rely on secondary regulations that are being drafted and will only get to be properly drafted once the bill's gone through royal assent, and then there'll be consultation phases. So for the most part, you won't see anything that really changes for another 12 months at the earliest, and then some of these things will be phased. So that little bit of context, that's the bit we should be really stressing to employers right now. And it doesn't take away from your chart, or Resolutions Foundation chart, about how expensive it is to hire comparatively is a really important piece. But so we just need to get over this hump of April of there's a lot of cost being laid onto all businesses, ours, yours alike. You know, all of us are feeling this, but we get through that, and then we know that some of the regulatory changes, they don't necessarily impact what you need to do just yet. You need to be aware of them. You need to be really clear about what this means for your organisation. So simple things that we do know are in there. We know that there is going to be this guaranteed right to flexibility from day one, which people have been talking about for a long time. So can I work flexibly, please? Can I make that request? Yes, you can. You can do that. So businesses will have to be able to respond to that request. Doesn't mean to say you have to do exactly what the request has been. But you have to engage with the conversation. We know that there's going to be a piece that talks about 0 hours contracts, and how do you end unfair, inflexible or one-sided flexibility of 0 hours contracts. And it will apply across the piece, so it will be for both temporary agency staff as well as for anybody who's directly employed on a 0 hours contract. But all the details of what that means, that's what I mean about secondary regulations need to be written. So it's not just if you are on a contract that says your guaranteed number of hours would be 0. It will be if you're on a low hours contract, because what you want to avoid here is a situation where some unscrupulous employers, and don't get me wrong, there are businesses doing these things brilliantly and beautifully every day and responding directly to, let's use young people, to what they need in terms of flexible working. But you don't want a situation where you get some businesses saying, actually, I'm just going to put you on a 1 hour contract instead to avoid the rules. So it'll be about low hours, and what's low hours look like to be agreed. So we don't know yet. So it will affect all of them. And then what will happen is it will be a right that you have if you are on one of those contracts and you've been working in a regular pattern of work for something like maybe 12 weeks, maybe longer, with that same employer, that after that you have a right to continue. They'll offer you guaranteed hours in the same pattern going forward. And you can decline it if you don't want to do that. And if there isn't that work available, because it is genuinely temporary. So the hospitality sector talks about this a lot. If you are if you're providing staff over a summer season, there won't be, work that's then available come September necessarily in the same pattern. So you can't offer work that doesn't exist. But if the work does continue to exist, you have to offer it. So that's one thing. And then a couple of other things really quickly, because there's loads and loads of detail, like I say, is thinking about, okay, what will I do in terms of a day one right to unfair dismissal? That will be in there, but how that works in practice is to be sorted out. What do you need to do around fire and rehire and collective redundancies? There's information in there that's likely to change. There's not in there anything to do with a right to switch off, which was one of the things that the press picked up on very early. And there's nothing in there about worker status changing just yet. So there's lots in there, but there's also lots that's not in there. So I think it's a bigger programme of change that's to come as well.
And interestingly, thanks, Kate, that's so helpful. And interestingly, we do want better jobs, right? We do want to have a bit more security. It's often young people that are in some volatile roles where they don't know what their hours are. They don't know whether or not they're going to have any flexibility if they ask for it, if they'll be affected differently or treated differently by asking for some flexibility. So, in a moment you'd go, actually, these employment rights are the right thing. We want to be able to have people be assured of their hours and their contracts and where they stand, and that clarity is good. It is, as we've felt this barrage of change coming, and it's important that you point out we're still 12 months away from some of it being in play, but it feels like a lot for employers to be digesting and to be managing in one foul sweep, which is possibly the thing that maybe the government got wrong, is in making all of these big announcements in one go that felt like they were all fairly immediately coming at us, and that's what's taken that moment of pause for so many. I think then let's think about, I guess, the point of optimism you have, and it's right to. We've got this big moment coming with the national insurance hikes, but actually we need to start stimulating growth. We need to encourage businesses to hire. We need to be able to get them connected and get them the talent that they need. B, what do you think you'd want to see now from government? Now we've had the spring statement. What do they really now need to be out doing, saying, connecting, driving to bring that confidence back into places?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as I said, I think there's lots of things that they have mentioned that are the right things in the right direction, but we've got to, this is urgent, 1 million young people out of the workplace, and the longer they are out, the more it affects them. So it'd be great to see actually that support. We've already had some quite scary changes around announcements around welfare, but a big announcement that there'll be employment support. So let's get some support into those young people and not wait till they hit crisis point. One of the things that I am spending quite a lot of time on is thinking about apprenticeships for young people. So the research evidence says that actually if you want to really help young people into the labour market, then apprenticeships are one of the most effective ways, because it helps people train, it develops their qualifications, but it gets them into work. And actually with the drop off of work experience and Saturday jobs and all those sorts of things, one of the big things our young people are missing is work experience. But what we've known is that apprenticeships for young people have dropped off, so we do need some changes to be able to open up opportunities for young people and apprenticeships. And we've also, I think, seen a drop off of those pathways into apprenticeships. When I was in the West Midlands, one of the most exciting things we did was a programme called Path to Apprenticeship, which very much takes young people who just wouldn't get those apprenticeships on a kind of open market and really put them into a sort of pre-apprenticeship programme, which gives them the support that they need to develop their skills, the exposure to workplace, financial support in order to make sure it's affordable for those young people to do it. So that was either about a payment or keeping their benefits while they're on that programme, and support for employers too, because actually we've got to de-risk it for employers. If we want employers to offer apprenticeships and there's not enough apprenticeships for young people, we've got to support our employers as well as their young people. Now that's a great programme, but actually it's got to be operated at scale. So I think thinking about how we do those sorts of things to be able to quickly and get up to scale. And that might mean something about subsidised employment or guaranteed jobs for our most marginalised young people. I think one of the challenges when the unemployment numbers are so high for young people is that we tend to forget in the size of the problem that for some of our young people, the challenge is so difficult, and actually we mustn't take our eye off some of those young people, our care leavers, some of our minority ethnic groups, our disabled young people, about how we support them to not just be part of a big group of people who aren't in work, but how we make sure they've got decent life chances in the future. So I think just a bit of traction, a bit of movement, particularly on things like apprenticeships and how can we use those levers to help more young people get opportunities would be great.
Yeah, and some of that is government, and some of that is decisions that we might make as businesses. I was on a call yesterday with the National Trust. I expect that they'll be tuning into the recording because they couldn't make this call. But actually, I was delighted to be hearing their commitment, despite challenges and despite being such a big charity with big overhead costs, to ensuring they're providing level 2 and level 3 apprenticeships. And their leader was really conscious of making sure there was enough level 2 apprenticeships coming into their business, and is working with disability charities to adapt those level 2 entry routes for young people with special education needs and disabilities in particular. And that's not because anyone's incentivizing them to do that. That's not because anyone is, in fact, if anything, the incentive has been around hiring level 6 or upskilling your existing workforce than taking on these young people at those levels. That's where the incentive has been driven over the last few years. So the fact that employers can still make those choices about where they spend their focus and where they spend their apprenticeship levy money, we'll perhaps see some more flex of that coming with the changes that might come down the line with the levy. But there is stuff that we can be doing. And Kate, are you seeing that with some of your network in terms of actually, despite what's happening at government and the economic mood swing, people are doing other things that are really exciting and stimulating kind of opportunity in a different way?
Yes, and just to finish up on your last point first, if I may, is that actually when you look across the jobs market and that need for staff, they're at the level 2 layer. And so when you think about it in terms of that entry point, when all of the focus was on level 3, it did feel like you're missing a trick. So actually the entry opportunities and the vacancies we've got are at a different level. So how are we bringing people on? And we're not. that mismatch between employment and skills policy was just really stark to see. And the second thing to add to that is that we just need to get on with the levy being, you know, in terms of it's got to be fit for purpose. I don't think it's worked, you know, as an apprenticeship levy. It hasn't done what it was supposed to do, which was incentivize businesses to offer apprenticeships. It's just and this is one of those things where I think LJ, probably Fiona as well, we were sat in rooms where it was just like, we don't think this is going to incentivize, actually. I mean, it does feel like a "I told you so" moment. The idea is there's a right nugget of an idea there about how do you get businesses to invest in their training. And there's a huge point about how do businesses genuinely invest. I don't think we capture everything that employers already do around training, because that's often one of the things that's thrown back at us. And so there's loads of really exciting, good stuff going on. It's not to say that people can't do more. One of the things that we've worked on and have been super delighted to work on, actually, and surprisingly so, and I'm going to say this to this safe room, is that, because you'll remember this, is we worked on Kickstart, and that wasn't a great experience for all concerned. Let's be entirely honest, and my DWP friends will agree with me on that. That was seriously hard work. But then we decided we were going to do some work on Restart, and that was really to bring people back in who were first of all unemployed during COVID, but now it's been extended past that. So it's not just about those people that lost a job during COVID. It's about really working with people that are further away, further back from being job ready. And the thing that's worked there has been the partnership approach. And it's just having the right people working on the right things. So on Restart, we've got a situation where we have the employability providers doing what they do best and thinking about how do you upskill people? How do you get them to the place where they are confident and ready to even apply for the roles? You've got recruiters, our members, working on how do you give people the information they need and help them with some of those recruitment skills that they need okay, what do I do when I go into the job finding space? How do I go through this CV writing and job application process? What am I supposed to put on here? And what are my big no-nos? And how do I work this out if I'm doing an easy apply button on LinkedIn or something like that? Like really figure that, like help them with some of that. And then what do I need to do when I'm in the interview process? How do I speak to people and feel confident about that? And the job centre doing the bit that the job centre does best, which is really helping people with the benefits situation and like what do they need to know and what hours can they work and all of those things. Bringing that together, pooling it, we found it's worked really, really well. Kel surprise, people doing what they do best. The things but doing it collaboratively has been great, and we've got some great examples. And I think my other thing is I am fully with you about it being about work that is sustainable, that is enjoyable, but it's about meeting people where they are. And some of the things that we found on Restart is actually people do feel like they need an entry point back into the workforce sometimes, particularly if they're coming back or if they're new entrants to the labour market. So if we take young people and then newer entrants to the labour market, and they will be looking to do a few hours. They will be looking to do taster courses. So some of the things that we've seen that have worked really well is week 1, come in for 1 morning. Week 2, come in for 2 mornings. And week 3, let's get you in to be in every morning for 5 days a week, or, you know, working offsite if that's the role. And actually some of these, they're really important stepping stones. A little bit of try before you buy actually makes a difference. Getting so many different experiences of different sectors and going, even if the experience is, I never ever want to work in that industry ever again. Thank you very much. That's a learning point. And that's great for people to know, but they don't get that unless they get the opportunities. So those are the things that I think are working really well.
And I think that's really important. I think when you take the evidence that Youth Futures Foundation have been taking and others, those of us that have been working in and around the skills and youth employment space for a long time, personalised, tailored, you know, work experience, gentle steps, good opportunities that are fulfilling, that are a good environment to be in, they're the things that make the difference. And having trusted good people around you to help you when you fall off or take a step back to bring you back the 3 steps forward that you might need as well. Like, there's no magic needed here, and actually I hope government don't want to spend the next 2 years doing massive, sorry Fiona, in YFF, but RCTs, or because we know, right, we just need to actually see that money being stimulated into the getting things done and doing the right thing, which is something that I think it's now time to do more of the right thing, which is the stuff you're talking about. Really quickly, there's some interesting chats going on in the chat box, questions going in. I'm delighted that Chubb are doing paid work experience, and it's a feeder into their apprenticeship program. That's the excellent practice we talk about here at Youth Employment UK all the time. You know, there is no reason why an employer can't get a return on investment when they're thinking about work experience and creating opportunities and ensuring that's a pipeline feeder into their program. So good for Chubb Insurance. Catherine, you should tell them they should be a member of Youth Employment UK. They'd get a gold sticker and everything. The learning aspects of apprenticeships and whether or not it's possible for participants' parents to keep benefits. That's a real sticky point, right, Fiona? We've been talking about this for quite a while now, that if a young person is in an apprenticeship, that should be considered as a learning position and therefore not affect benefits, but I don't think that's coming in this next
I
year
feel
or two.
like I've been hitting my head against that brick wall for many years. It's absolutely true, isn't it? And that if you do an apprenticeship, your parents lose your child benefits 16 to 18. If you stay in a college, that they don't. Actually, having a benefits system skew your post-16 choices when we know apprenticeships can be one of the most effective routes to kickstarting a career. It is really detrimental. What I would say, and I did a piece of work years ago for DFE on whether that rule should change, is it's not just child benefit. Actually, it's the child element of universal credit, and for kind of benefit for families with a kind of greater proportion of benefits making their income, it can make a massive difference. It can make like £80 a week, which for some families is absolutely massive. But if we want young people to have the best educational option for them, and we are saying that they should stay in some form of educational training until 18, then I do think it's something we need to really seriously look at. So we're not condemning some young people to have a suboptimal option for them. We really need to get behind our young people and give them the very best options. And this is where cross-government works together. It's not just about training, it is about those broader pieces.
Could not agree more. And we are having, you know, all of our organisations, as I'm sure many of the delegates in the room are talking to government. We are talking to government on the daily about some of these obstacles that exist for our young people. So it is one that we're talking about. Right, I want a yes or a no. You're not allowed to say any other answer to this question. I'm not having you on the fence, ladies. Because Zora's a friend of mine. What do you think about foundation apprenticeships? Will 2K incentive payment be enough to get employers involved? Kate, yes or no?
Why do you make me do this? I'd like to say yes, but I'm going to say no. I'm not sure. I'm really it's not the right market for it.
Fiona, yes or no? 2,000 going to make your networks take on foundation apprentices?
Quick answer is no, but I'd love to chat about why.
Okay, and it's a great question, because actually Youth Employment UK are chairing, supporting the all-party parliamentary group on youth employment, and we have just launched an inquiry that kicked off last week that asks the question, how do we get employers involved in the youth guarantee? So how do we support our employers? Is it incentives? Is it support? Is it brokerage systems? We want to know what's worked in the past to get employers engaged with youth employment initiatives, and the APPG is leading that inquiry. One of my colleagues I know has probably already put the link to the inquiry in the chat, but it's open for written submissions. So if you've worked in that space of employer engagement and you think that you've got some evidence of what works or what absolutely doesn't work when it comes to these opportunities, please do take a look at the APPG. And we're expecting to have ministers from DFE and DWP receive our report and recommendations. So that's a really timely question. Thanks, Laura. I expect the Edge Foundation will be submitting into the APPG inquiry. Okay, I'm coming up to the end of our session with a few bits that I do need to share with you. So before I pull back the slides, Kate, Fiona, can we just do this every Thursday? It feels like something that we could just
Lovely.
yeah, right. How
Bit of
much
group
fun. The sun is
therapy.
coming in. Yeah, loved it. You two are fabulous. If there's anything that you want to share or follow up with people, please do use the chat function now while I just finish up. But my sincere thanks to both of you. You are phenomenal colleagues to work with, and you know, I see you both as my guiding light. So thank you very much, ladies. I will see you at the next time. For the rest of you, you need to know about some upcoming events. If you like today's webinar, then I suggest you're going to love the next ones coming up. We'll be hosting a webinar on the 25th of April with our very good friends of the Careers and Enterprise Company, where we're going to be talking all things about modern work experience. The Labour government committed to putting 2 weeks of work experience back into the school curriculum. The CEC have been spending a lot of time with us and other partners thinking about how we can make that work. Is it really fundamentally 2 weeks back to filing, photocopying and coffee making? It's absolutely not. That's not what we want. So come and join us to find out what the CEC are thinking about and how they're delivering that. Then in May, we'll be talking with our members about championing youth employment, change in action, what really is making a difference to our employers and what return on investment are they seeing, because that's what we've got to start talking about. For those of you that are not yet members of Youth Employment UK, I really strongly urge you to connect with us and have a look at the deep expertise that's available to you for all of your early careers, HR advice, insights, support, connections, webinars like this, policy practice, and more. You can join membership with us at a very reasonable rate. So please do engage with us. And that includes looking at how you can recruit all of your early career vacancies across our website, which last year engaged with over 4 million young people looking for careers, inspiration and employers. You've heard me talk about the 2024 data. The data's key. Without data understanding what's working and not working for young people, we can't really tailor services, which we know is a thing that works. So on Monday, we will open this year's Youth Voice Census, and we would ask all of you with young people aged 11 to 30 in your network, whether that's the kids at home or the kids in your settings or the young people who work with you, or you if you're a young person, we want to hear your voice this year on the Youth Voice Census. You'll have until the 6th of June to complete it, and there's loads of resources coming. When you start to see our socials pop next week, please do us the biggest favour in sharing, retweeting, re-insting. I don't know what you do with Instagram, but doing some of those really good things, please, everybody. And that's all. This recording, this webinar and its slide deck will all be available across tomorrow for all of those that want to have a look or share it with colleagues. We hope it's been useful. Please do complete the survey then when it comes out, and we'll see you all for another one. Thank you very much.